You are now watching Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' peeps? Welcome back to the channel, Lesage here. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 best decks in the Fusion Strike format. There's been a little bit of movement here, so no surprises, no leaks. We're going to jump into it very soon. All the lists are going to be in the pinned comment below. Check that out. Also check out the description for a lot of great stuff. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and you want to know what? Let's just hop into our number 10 spot, see exactly what we got going on. Let's get it. Hopping into our number 10 spot, we have Baby Galarian MOLTRES. So this is a deck that not a lot of people were expecting, but Ross Coffin, multiple worlds runner-up, created this deck, and it's won a couple tournaments in the past week or so. Notably, a large 100+ player tournament with Logan McKay winning this list, my really good friend. That being said, this deck really aims to beat Mew because you are a basic single prize card Pokemon that is dark type. And Hoopa, basically the goal of this deck, you go Hoopa, attack with Assault Gate, and then once they knock out your Pokemon, you hit them with the Galarian Moltres. You can get those Galarian Moltres and energies back to play everything down with Malevolent Charge, and Clara them back and back and back and back. I think this deck is really cool. It falls into the kind of single prize card-esque range of decks where you have the players who are playing Malamar are going to play this deck, or maybe they're going to switch over to a different kind of deck like Regidrago, or maybe they're going to try a different kind of deck like Baby Single Strike URSHIFU. So I think that's the reason why this deck hit number 10. We're likely going to see this list fall off, unless of course it gets a big win this upcoming week, but it's one of those things where decks like this fall off very quickly. We can see how Malamar was close to a top 5 deck, and Malamar barely makes the top 20 list nowadays. And it really just goes with playability, so we'll have to see as the deck progresses. I think this is a really good deck if you're trying to counter Mew. It's fairly budget conscious as well. Most cards are really easy to acquire, but at the same time, it is difficult to play sometimes, and the deck, people might be looking at other single prize cards or trying to reinvent the wheel. So we'll see exactly how it goes. I think this deck is great, but it's likely going to go all the way down to underplayed. Here we are at number 9, and here is Victini. It jumped up from number 20 last week all the way to number 9, so 11 spots is a big deal. But any deck that was in the kind of 11 to 20 range can definitely make it into the lower half of the top 10 with limited results. There's only so many decks in a formats. I'd say like in any given week there's about 30 different decks played on the play limit list. Some of them just hop up in a very small tournament, and that isn't weighted very much. Obviously the larger the events, it gets a little bit more there, but Victini's been doing some numbers. It actually won the late night number 8 events with an Inteleon engine. I actually like this version a little bit more, the one created by Lee Bowie. I think they both get to the same point. Path to the Peak is very good against Mew. I actually like Crushing Hammers and Fan of Waves, just in case Mew is able to get through Path to the Peak, which quite often Mew can overcome anything. Victini VMAX's goal is just to be as turbo as possible, max victory, knocking out Pokemon V or two-shotting Pokemon VMAX. I think decks like this are like, they're moderately appropriate to play in the metagame. Like, I've played this deck against Duraludon. You destroy Duraludon. You destroy Turbo Zacian most of the time. Like, these are matchups that you are going to win against. I mean, you're also okay against Mew. You can do okay against Jolteon as well. And you can even do well against Single Strike. So this is the type of deck that does really well against the top of the metagame, but as soon as you run into other things that are really different, such as a single prize card attacking deck, because you only do 100 damage to them, your deck completely crumbles. Your deck completely crumbles to all the Ice Riders and Suicune variants in the metagame. And I mean, Victini is a little fragile as well with only 4 basics. So I think Victini is a cool deck. It's one of those things where I'm not personally about it, but I do see where it does have merit in this metagame, so it might be a worthwhile play for you to try out if you're looking to try out something a little bit more budget conscious, or if you're really looking to hit some decks with some Crushing Hammer RNG, some Path to the Peak goodness. I mean, Victini VMAX is a great deck for a new player entering the game because there's limited mechanics, but it can compete with other top decks. So keep that in mind with the holidays coming up. This might be the deck for someone to start playing the game with. Here we are at number 8, and jumping up from one spot last week at number 9 is Rapid Strike Urshifu Melony. So towards Brainchild from a few months ago, seeing a little bit more success nowadays, or I guess it's a little bit less success because the deck was closer to the top of the metagame. I think right now the issue with a deck like this is that even though Pissimian and Telescopic Sight and GMAX Rapid Flow and Metacham, yeah, I know that's a lot of cards. It's trying to knock out Genesect and Mew. It's that layering Psychic type weakness that really holds this deck back, because Mew is by far one of the most successful decks in our format. I don't want to leak out what our top decks are, but Mew might be up there. No leaks. It is one of those things where having Psychic type weakness is difficult for a lot of decks to deal with nowadays, and without having a proper counter, you don't necessarily get the same nuances that other games have. Like, you could just lose on turn 1 by starting with a single strike Urshifu V, because Meloetta could just knock you out for 300 plus damage, right? Like, you do not need a lot to beat this deck relatively early when you're playing one of those more aggressive decks. Now, with Jolteon also seeing a lot of success, that's really where these fighting decks have a chance. Personally, I'm staying away from the Rapid Strike decks because I feel like Rapid Strike decks in general struggle against a lot of the decks within closer to the top 5 or last week's top 5. Mew has that Psychic type weakness. We have Duraludon with those special energy blocking. I mean, there's definitely ways to just beat this matchup. You also have ZACIAN that plays Zamazenta. There's just decks that I think beat this deck, so it's one of those ones where I don't think it's appropriately placed in the metagame. The fact that this deck is this high on the list, I mean, it makes sense when we have other decks like Baby MOLTRES that lose to decks like this, because we got to look at the strength of GMAX Rapid Flow. You're able to knock out Houndour, you're able to knock out Sobbles, you're able to OHKO a Jolteon VMAX with a single Gale Thrust. So between the Sobbles, Houndours, Lotad, single prize card Pokemon, there's a reason why these decks are placing, but there's also a reason why the Rapid Strike decks continuously fall week after week into the lower half of the top 10, the top half of the top 20, so the 11 to 12 range. So as we continuously explore this format, I think that this deck's going to exist. I think it's going to spike and win a few tournaments. I just don't necessarily think it's as well positioned as many people think, and realistically, I ask myself a lot of the times, Zach, why are you reinventing the wheel? Why are you not playing a deck within the top 5? And I think that's what a lot of players need to ask themselves as well. If a deck is not consistently ranked within the top 5, it's fine to fall out a week, it's fine to fall out a couple weeks, but if your deck has not made the top 5 in the past few weeks, you gotta, in the past few months or a month and a half or something like that, basically since Fusion Strike has come out, you got to ask yourself why, and maybe that's why you're not seeing the results you want to have. So that's not necessarily to pick on Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. I think this deck's absolutely awesome. This is my favorite build of Rapid Strike Urshifu, and I know that my buddy Cal Connor's been seeing a lot of success with this deck. I'm just saying, think about the decks that you're choosing for these events, and think about if you're putting limitations on yourself as a player. So as a side note, that's something to definitely think about. Let's jump into number 7. Here we are at number 7, and falling from number 4 last week, 3 spots, is Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Galarian Moltres V. Now, the reason why this deck plays Galarian Moltres V is because it's trying to beat Mew VMAX. So what Rapid Strike Urshifu Melony cannot do, this deck is trying to do by basically including a hard, dark Pokemon to basically be like, yo, we got weakness, and hopefully that works. And I mean, sometimes it works. And when I say sometimes, I don't even think the Galarian Moltres V allows Mew to be a favorable matchup. This deck kind of feels like it's built with popsicle sticks and glue. And what I mean by that, it's just like, it takes the concept of Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, uses Galarian Moltres V as just a concept of a different deck, and then just throws an Inteleon to try to make it all work together, and it feels like you're playing 2 different decks at once, and that's why the consistency of this deck just is straight down. Of course this deck's going to win tournaments. Of course players are going to love playing this deck. Of course there's a whole bunch of reasons why this deck is in number 7, but I do want to note that this deck hit a peak and then it cannot compete with the new age Mews anymore. This deck is really almost there to sometimes beat Mew, beat Jolteon, sometimes beat Single Strike, and that's really it for decks that are at the top of the metagame. So you got to ask yourself, if you're just trying to beat decks that are not within the top 10, or you're just trying to beat like 1 to 2 decks that you don't always try to, that you don't even always beat, you got to ask yourself if it's really the deck for you. So I think like my general consensus on Rapid Strike URSHIFU VMAX, I think it's a great card. We saw Rapid Strike URSHIFU VMAX in general win the Players Cup 3, Players Cup 4, Players Cup Invitational. Like, the card itself is a multi-championship winning card. I cannot deny that. But in this particular format, the way that the game is structured and grown, I just don't think that until Mew's put in check, that a deck like this can really survive at the top tables. So if this is your favorite deck, this is not Zach trying to hate on your favorite deck. I'm just trying to give you the absolute real and in how my mindset would go. So I think this deck's cool. I don't think it's well positioned. There's a reason why it's falling down the list. That's kind of where I'll leave the Rapid Strike right now. Now, if Mew somehow falls off the list or gets put in check, or maybe a tournament organizer decides to ban it or anything else like that, these decks can flourish a lot more. Maybe not the Galarian MOLTRES V version. It might be the type of deck that takes a back seat because you don't really need that dark type Pokemon in the case of anything of that happening. But I do think Rapid Strike URSHIFU VMAX is a really it's a really cool card, just not well positioned right now. Here we are at our number 6 spot, and also at number 6, you can see where there's kind of that big jump of 80 CP from Rapid Strike URSHIFU Moltres up to Ice Rider, and I think this is really the start of where we get to the solidified lists and the decks that are seeing a little bit more consistent event results. So I think Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX is a great choice because you're able to just go Ride of the High King. You're able to kind of go between Ride of the High King, Max Lance to plan either OKOs or 2 HKOs effectively without discarding all of your energies and keeping your resources in play. We see how quick shooting can really add up throughout games. I mean, quick shooting's a little bit of a weird case nowadays because of Mew VMAX, but we do have access to Crushing Hammers and Fan of Waves in this particular list. Something that I'd like to see in like future iterations of this deck is maybe Path to the Peak. It might just be because Crushing Hammers and Fan of the Waves do exist in this deck, but I do find that this deck does hold its own against Mew somewhat. It holds its own against Jolteon. I feel like it holds its own against a lot of decks in kind of a neutral way where games could go either way, but Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX does feel relatively skilled, and I do really enjoy playing this deck when I do get the opportunity to play it. So I don't think this deck is like super well positioned, but I also don't think it's poorly positioned either. I think it's like, again, that middle of the road deck that you are going to have a bunch of grindy games, but you can kind of overcome anything with a type of deck like this. And I think that's something that's really cool. Like, you're not necessarily going to run into too many matches and be like, oh no, here we go again. Because when I'm playing Mew, for example, and I run into a dark type matchup, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a tough one. It's going to be really tough. Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX is like, this matchup might be difficult, but I still always have a chance to win this game. So in terms of a neutral deck, Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX is a really great choice. I think the cards have also gone down drastically, so if you're looking to pick up any of these cards, you can go to PTCGO use code ZLesage5, and save 5% on your order online. It's also one of those things too where it's just a really cool deck to play. So by all means, give it a try. And again, check out the description with the pinned comments. There's also a featured list for all of these decks. The same ones that are in the video, you can copy and paste them right into PTCGO. You also have reference videos for most, if not all, of the decks on this list. So you could watch and see exactly how I played the deck. I try to cover every deck within the top 10, and if not, the top 20 as well. So when we do get to the top 20 video tomorrow, and by all means, check out that new series so you can see which decks barely didn't make it, or the decks that kind of exist within our greater metagame. I think it's one of those things that's awesome. That being said, Ice Rider's cool. Icy cool, no pun intended, I don't know. We're gonna jump into number 5. Here we have it, number 5, and at number 5 from last week is Turbo Zacian Zamazenta, the deck that goes Intrepid Sword, attaches energies, draws cards, and goes Brave Blade. And if you hit a VMAX deck that doesn't really look like they have a counter, such as Rapid Strike or URSHIFU for the most part, you can go out there and Zamazenta it up with Dauntless Shield, or maybe discard some of their special energies with Assault Tackle. This deck, again, in that 250-ish range, very close to Ice Rider and very close to other decks within this kind of general range. I do feel like Turbo Zacian is the type of deck that might just by default be within the top 5 by now. So this is a deck that I've said previously that I don't really like, and I think maybe the consistency of this deck, or just the ease of play to play this deck to success, really allows it to cement itself. And don't get me wrong, sometimes decks that are easy to play, or that I perceive as easy to play, are some of the more successful decks. I've seen a lot of success with Blacephalon GX, I've seen a lot of success with other decks that are similar to this kind of structure. Josh Sutherland, my homie, typically is the most successful player playing this deck in any given tournament that you might see. Might run into some obstacles. I've definitely watched the pairings and see Josh run into a Victini, but even this deck can overcome it sometimes as well. So really, I think that Turbo Zacian might just be the best kind of deck for new players. I think it's the best deck to play if you're looking to not invest a whole bunch, but have a very competitive deck. And I think it really is a solid deck nowadays. I really cannot deny that when a deck continuously makes top 5, that I don't understand why it's not there. Josh is literally one of the better players online, literally one of the best online players in the game right now. There's a reason why he continuously plays this deck and continuously sees success with this deck. So if you're trying to replicate that success, give Turbo Zacian a try. I know that it has an interesting Mew matchup. It has a lot of interesting matchups, but attaching a bunch of energies and doing a lot of damage early on really is not a bad strategy ever. Again, I think that any deck from this point up is probably going to be pretty close to the top 5, if not exactly where it is. I think we're getting to the point of where the top 5 is pretty sticky, and we're going to need to see another deck like Duraludon come out, or something that we've previously tried to play around with that didn't get a chance, in order to smash these numbers. So let's jump into our number 4 spot, see exactly what's going on. Here we go, our number 4 deck, and previously at number 8, we have Duraludon VMAX. Duraludon VMAX has been moving up a whole bunch, and this is my current take on the deck. I've done a lot of talking with a lot of my friends. I don't necessarily know if Zamazenta does anything in this deck. I've looked at every single match and I'm like, you can just use Melobetta. And then against Jolteon, I'm like, Jolteon's just going to play Path to the Peak. And against Single Strike, I'm like, okay, Single Strike's just going to go through anything with GMAX 1 blow. And then I'm like, you want to know what? We don't even need to worry about Turbo Zacian. We don't, like, the list goes on and on and on, to the point where I'm like, I don't think Zamazenta V necessarily has a great place in this list. Something that Skyscraper can do is really just hit decks with special energies. There's actually a lot more in common with Duraludon VMAX and Zamazenta than I originally once thought for the Pokemon that they block. So this is my current take on the list. I might change it up going a little bit forward, but I figured why not share my take on it. I think Caitlyn might be better than Avery as well, because you are able to build up a gigantic hand, put cards that you might not necessarily need at the bottom of your deck because you don't necessarily need them, draw those cards and keep your big hand. Might be better than Avery. We'll have to see how it plays out, but I think this is a really interesting way to play the deck, and I very much enjoy the way that this deck has been playing for me. I might cover it again on the channel, but Duraludon VMAX is really going to be blocking Pokemon that has special energies. I know a lot of players ask, why do you play Flannery in this deck? Why would you want to be discarding your opponent's special energies? And that's if you're looking at the card one-dimensionally. If we're looking at it as well, it can discard a Stadium in play, and that Stadium in play could definitely be a Path to the Peak, something that could get through Skyscraper. So at the same time, special energies, if your opponent has no energies in play, they can't really do anything. So think of something like a Mew VMAX archetype, for example. If you discard special energies off of them, they might not be able to use Max Miracle. A lot of decks have ways around things. So as I look through it, I think Flannery might just be a really good way around decks like that. Overall, really interesting build for Duraludon VMAX, but Duraludon VMAX is going to continuously see success at this point. We've seen enough tournament wins, and I think this deck is just like edging out Turbo Zacian a little bit. You can see that they're very similar decks, but I think Duraludon VMAX is currently a little bit more effective in our current metagame than we have for Turbo Zacian right now. So, will this deck continuously make top 5? Yeah, I think this deck is probably solidified at number 4, but we might even see it move up as high as number 3. Although I do think the top 3 decks in the metagame are pretty much solidified at this point. Hopping into our number 3 spot, and number 3 last week, so you can see a lot of these decks are getting very solidified within the top 5, is Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX. Now this deck is well positioned because it's half dark type, half fighting type. So what Rapid Strike URSHIFU VMAX MOLTRES aims to do, but this deck does it so much better because it's tied within the same Single Strike stamp / package of Houndoom being able to accelerate energies to both Pokemon. I mean, let's put it like this. If Rapid Strike Energy could be attached to both GALARIAN MOLTRES and Rapid Strike URSHIFU, would the deck be more successful? You'd be crazy to think that it wouldn't be, right? So the fact that Single Strike Energy does work on both Single Strike URSHIFU V and Umbreon V, and all the other Pokemon in this deck for the most part except Crobat, you could really see where this deck can grow. Now, the goal of this deck is to really bring up your opponent's Pokemon with Dark Signal. You have fighting type attackers with Single Strike URSHIFU V. You could evolve into the VMAX to go through anything such as Duraludon, hence that's why we play 2-2 line. We have Umbreon and V for Mew decks. I mean, the deck is well positioned because it does well against the top decks in the format. I've added a Morpeko into this deck. Explosive Discontent does hit the correct numbers to knock out a Mew with 2 Single Strike energies from Single Strike Roar. That adds 40 damage to the Morpeko, which means that Explosive Discontent's going to do 120 base damage plus 40 damage from Single Strike Energy, 160 times 2 against a Mew for a knockout as a single prize card Pokemon. Then they are forced to bring up something else or knock at the Morpeko, drawing only 1 prize card, so you could put your opponent in between a rock and a hard place. I've also added a Single Strike Scroll of Scorn. I think that the card is interesting, although I think it is the first cuttable card from this deck. I'm not sure entirely what I'd add in. Maybe I'd like to add in an additional Marnie, an additional Zinnias, an additional Tower of Darkness. I think there's a lot of cards that you could add into this deck as the metagame's kind of solidified itself. So I think this deck's probably going to stay within the top 3. If not, it might just stay within the top 5. Because this is the deck, like, you could see that, like, with Zacian, we had 270 CP. Duraludon had 280. Single Strike had 310. Those are within a range that, like, one more top cut or one additional tournament where players who regularly play at that time might play one of those 3 decks more than another could really spike up these events. And that's really how close it is sometimes. But again, I think naturally that this is slightly better than Duraludon, slightly better than Zacian right now, although I do think Duraludon does have the potential to move on up as a deck. Even though that I think Duraludon's a little bit fragile, it is the type of deck that can overcome decks like this. Now that being said, Single Strike is been seeing a lot of success since our Evolving Skies metagame. I totally think that the builds are better in general than Duraludon, so until we get to the point where Duraludon has a skeleton build like this, where you can really have just like the perfect list or very close to a perfect list, I don't think it's necessarily going to move up. Anyways, I could ramble on forever. Let's move on to number 2. Here we are at number 2, and previously at number 2. So again, I do want to point out that a lot of the decks within the top 5 are pretty sticky. Like I said, Jolteon VMAX is here with a whopping 760 CP. Now, the CP is more than double of what Single Strike has. It's basically Single Strike plus Duraludon plus Zacian. So if you're wondering why this deck's up here, this deck is seeing a lot of success, and it's really just like a better version of Rapid Strike URSHIFU VMAX, because you have, it's very similar with the GMAX Rapid Flow compared to Max Thunder Rumble, because it's 120 plus 120, discard all your energies, or 100 plus 100, keep everything in there. Since you're not discarding your energies, you have room for things like Path of the Peak, Fan of Waves, which allow you to stay competitive when it comes to decks such as Mew VMAX. I do think that Jolteon VMAX is kind of like, just by default, the second best deck in format right now. And it can really compete with the same things by knocking out Sobbles, Houndours, Path to the Peak can definitely Grinch Mew. I've been there as a Mew player where Path to the Peak just works. I've also been there where Path to the Peak doesn't work. But right now, I think for the times that Path to the Peak does work, Jolteon VMAX does seem to see a lot of success. And it is really one of those things where I don't see how Jolteon VMAX is going to fall out of its number 2 spot. As Mew continuously keeps decks such as Rapid Strike Urshifu in check, you don't necessarily have to worry about the fighting weakness as much anymore. And even against decks like Single Strike, you could always Boss's Orders up, bring up something such as a Umbreon V or a Houndoom, and then snipe around things. So this deck has some tricky technical plays that really allow it to see the success level that it does, and I think that Jolteon VMAX is going to continuously see that success in any kind of format, because it is efficient to attack. It is more efficient than a Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, and it has the Elemental badge built in, the Path to the Peak. Like, there's so many good things going for this deck that you got to ask yourself, why would you not be playing this deck instead of Rapid Strike Urshifu? And again, it's not to be like this is better than Rapid Strike Urshifu, but Jolteon VMAX does hold its own against the metagame better right now. So in this particular Fusion Strike format, it is much better to play Jolteon VMAX if you are looking for that kind of snipe heavy deck, or placing multiple damage counters per turn, taking multiple prize cards per turn. And again, right before we get to our number 1, I do want to let everyone know that you could use code ZLESAGE5 to save 5% on your order at PTCGO The description has that discount code, by the way, and you could also check out the pinned comment below for all of the copy and pastable lists that are featured in this video. And there's also reference videos for most of them, if not all of them, with those pinned comments below if you're looking to play those decks. So maybe I skimmed over the description on how to play some of the decks for some of these. It is one of those things that I do want to let you know that those videos will show you how to expertly play these decks and show you how I've played them as well. That being said, Jolteon VMAX probably going to stay at number 2 just based off the CP ranking. Which deck is going to make our number 1? Put your guesses in either the live comments or in the comments below. I love when people guess, and I'll let y'all know how you did. Here's our number 1 spot. Previously at number 1, and with a crazy 1540 CP, we have Mew VMAX. So Mew VMAX has more than, is that more than double of what we had for the Jolteon deck? Jolteon would have been sitting at 1520 if I'm doing my math correctly. And so more than double of Jolteon, more than Jolteon, Single Strike, Duraludon, and I think ZACIAN combined. So Mew encompasses the entire top 5 in terms of CP. This is what we got going on for the deck. The deck works on copying different Fusion Strike attacks that you have in play and really hitting for those hard numbers, because you got power tablets to increase damage, you have Elves of Sparkle to accelerate energies, you have Max Miracle that goes through any attack, you have a built-in Fusion Strike system draw engine, you have ways to increase your damage with Melodious Echo, you have ways to search through anything with Cram-O-Matic, you have ways to stack your deck with Rotophone, draw cards, gust your opponent up with Boss's Orders or Escape Rope. And Fusion Strike Energy even blocks abilities such as Dark Signal and blocks Inteleon's Quick Shooting. Like, you really got to ask yourself, like, if you jam pack all this stuff into a deck, how could the deck ever be bad? And I mean, it brings up the debate, should Mew be banned? And when I say should Mew be banned, I think that's Mew as the archetype. The Mew encompasses the deck as a whole. A lot of people were kind of upset at my last argument because, like I said, I'm the largest tournament organizer in the online era of the game for Fusion Strike on. My late night series events are consistently the largest events on Play Limitless, and I do have ideas to run in real life events too. Check that out. Feel free to check out my Discord. I have some more details on that. But that being said, it's one of those things where I've thought about banning this deck at tournaments. If there's one piece that I think might actually be the kicker, it might actually be Meloetta. I know that most people are like, Genesect draws the cards, all that stuff's crazy. I think Meloetta adds for those crazier like edges that I think allow this deck to be ban worthy, because Melodious Echo can get that gigantic attack off as early as your first turn in the game. So if you go second, you could go Melodious Echo 210 plus up to 4 power tablets to do 330 damage, plus you could do weakness as well, so 660 damage turn 1, just absolutely gross. I think that's really the first step. Not to say that I think I'm going to be banning Meloetta, but just to kind of have a healthy debate here, it is one of those things where I think Meloetta might be the most scary part about this deck, because it does allow this deck to keep tempo to other decks. Genesect is probably the biggest card that would be wanting to take out of this deck if we were to be banning anything, for what it's worth. I think Meloetta and then Genesect are really the cards you want to experiment with, because those are the real problems with Mew. Otherwise, Mew is just a very interesting and kind of healthy, still powerful card, but I think it's one of those things where that's where I'm at. That being said, I'm not banning Mew right now. I think that would be disingenuous of me to ban Mew from a tournament, especially after I tell people that Mew is the #1 deck week after week, and people have picked up the cards online and stuff like that. I think that Mew VMAX does have its counters, although I do think if you are looking to play a deck in a tournament, there is no reason not to play Mew at this point. It is so far beyond any other deck that we have in the format, and I really want to make that point clear. Mew is by so clearly the best deck in the format that if you have Mews, or if you have a friend that you could knock on their door and be like, yo, can I play your Mews? This is the best deck to play. Now, in a format where you're going to be playing against only E-turn decks and Gengar decks, yeah, play something different. But in any event that has a mix of players and a mix of decks, this is clearly the best deck to play, and it is able to beat most of its counters as well. So keep that in mind. I think Mew is going to stay the best deck until it gets rotated, until we at least see what's coming out with Brilliant Stars. Let's put it like that. That's what we got going on for this video today, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the metagame. I know that the top 5 has stayed relatively stable, but that's really what we're looking for. You can see that there's a few nuances and changes in the lists, and that's really what I aim to do, is just provide you with my own competitive lists that I've worked on, or the best ones that I've found if I cannot come up with anything better. So maybe experiment with my list if you are looking to change things up. I mean, I've even been experimenting with switching cups. In Mew, I was able to make 6th place at the late night #8 event out of over 100 players. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of really cool decks in the formats, and I think experimenting with a list in a format where the top decks are solidified is really where you can make your mark as a player. So keep that in the back of your mind as you experiment with things. That being said, if you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up. It really helps boost the YouTube algorithm. When I say I spend countless hours coming up with spreadsheets, I have it on my other screen right now. It is one of those things where I do put a lot of time and effort in these videos, and some extra support there would be amazing, just so more people could watch this video. I know that these videos have been growing in views week after week, but if there's someone that you know who's getting into Pokemon and you want to share my channel with them, that'd be much appreciated. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, double check to see if you haven't subscribed already. I do that a lot of the time, even to my great friends. I'm like, yo, wait, I actually didn't sub to your channel, or I didn't follow you on Twitch. What? It's not necessarily like a stab or anything like that. It's literally just like, I'm forgetful, or maybe I had it on a different YouTube account before I had anything, or something like that. Anyways, be sure to double check, see exactly what you want. We're so close to 8,000 at the creation of this video. We're so close to 10,000. 10,000 is really my big goal for this channel, to get to that point, and I think anything after that is possible. So that being said, I wish everyone the best week they possibly can have. I hope you really enjoy these videos, and stay tuned for more daily Pokemon TCG content. I know the holidays are difficult with travel for a lot of people, but if you are having a tough time, just know that I am here with you with content, and if you ever need anything, by all means reach out to me. I am an open book. I'm here for the Pokemon community and anyone else in general. I'll just try to be there for anyone I possibly can be for. So that being said, I'm gonna go edit this video. I'll catch up with everyone later. Peace out, and have yourself a great day, and enjoy the rest of your week. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.